This is the Social Skills Mastery Podcast, episode 294.
To really compete as a professional or business owner, you have to own the room. That's why each week I bring you hot topics, tips, and expert interviews so you can stand out in competitive places. Let's get started.
You already know the cost of staying silent in meetings, ducking small talk, and letting someone less capable own the room. Another quarter goes by, same story, same excuses. Step into the spotlight is 5 days with me in an exclusive private container where there's no lurking or hiding. We strip the hesitation, kill the overthinking, and install the behaviors that read as presence, not false performance. You'll feel more free to speak up, you'll connect on command, and you'll feel different in the room because you will be different. If you're telling yourself that you'll work on it later, know that later is where executive presence goes to wither on the vine. Spots are limited on purpose so we can do the real work. If you're serious, grab your seat now at socialconfidencepro.com/spotlight. It's well worth your time. This may sound familiar. You handle the hard question in the meeting perfectly. Someone asks you to walk through the model or the data or the deal structure, and you're clear, you're precise, you don't fumble a single number, and heads nod. Someone even says, "Great answer." And then the meeting ends and everyone lingers by the door for 2 minutes of easy, unscripted chit-chat. And that's exactly when something in you just shuts down. You grab your laptop, you give the one-word answer when someone asks how your weekend was, and you watch a colleague who fumbled the technical part 15 minutes earlier own that 2 minutes completely. They're laughing, they're asking follow-up questions. They're getting invited to grab coffee with the person who's really making the decisions in the room. You did the hard part, but they got the invitation. If that scene smacks of a little too much reality, stick around, because today I'm going to show you why that happens regardless of how sharp, skilled, and credentialed you are. Hey there, welcome back to the Social Skills Mastery Podcast. I'm Susan Callender, and I work with high-performing professionals, the kind of people who've built serious, well-compensated careers by being excellent at what they do. If you're one of my people, you already know how to prepare for the hardest part of the job. What may have escaped you in the classroom and in all of your years of preparation is how to handle the 2 minutes of interpersonal interaction on either side of that. And that gap is exactly what we close. Okay, today I'm going to introduce you to 3 areas of interest pertaining to why some people seem to move through a room with ease, while equally smart, equally capable people are perceived as being harder to warm up to. We're going from the biggest mindset shift to the most overlooked aspects, to the patterns that keep repeating day after day, even when you know better. And by the end of the show, you'll walk away with 3 specific moves that you can start using in your very next meeting. Now, did you know that people decide whether they like you before they decide if they respect you? There's a body of research out of Princeton and Harvard that maps out the 2 things every one of us is unconsciously evaluating the moment we meet someone new. The 2 dimensions are warmth and competence. Warmth answers the question, can I trust this person? Can I trust their intentions toward me? And competence answers the question, can this person deliver? It's as simple as that. The part that matters for you, however, is that warmth gets assessed first. It's the filter people run before they even determine how capable you are, because on a survival level, humans need to know if someone's friend or foe before they care how skilled that person is. And the order in which we do that, it's not a preference. It's more like an innate default setting. Now, what that means is if you've spent your career building competence and almost none of your energy building warmth, because that's the default mode for a lot of my clients, you lead every interaction with your expertise. That seems right to you. You wait to be impressive. You assume the results will speak loudly enough that the rest just sorts itself out. And what you're doing without realizing it is skipping the filter people check first. They can't fully accept your competence until the warmth question gets answered. So the thing you spent all that preparation on lands on an audience that hasn't yet decided whether it's safe to like you at all. And when the filter never gets satisfied, people start describing you with words like cold or hard to read. Does that sound familiar? Because the order got skipped and the output was never the problem, but it's the sequencing that always will be. So I'll describe what it looks like from the outside. Let's say, I'll tell you the story. A client repeatedly got the feedback that was some version of, she brings incredible rigor, but people find her tough to connect with. And she used to think that that feedback was just a personality judgment that she'd have to live with. It was just a part of who she was. But it was a sequencing problem that came about because she was opening every single meeting with competence and never once with warmth. So the room was evaluating her expertise before it had decided whether it liked her. And that mismatch is exactly what read back to her as tough to connect with. But once she started opening with 15 seconds of a real question before her findings, the exact same rigor just started landing as confident instead of cold. And nothing about her analysis changed, but the order and how she presented herself did. So this is not asking you to become a different personality, not in any way. You don't need to become the loudest or the most animated person in the room. Warmth in this research, it reads through a small number of specific learnable signals. And genuine curiosity about the other person is the first one. A question that isn't about work or eye contact that lingers a beat longer than feels a little natural at first. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. So the practical move is this. In your next meeting, before you get to your update, your recommendation, your answer, whatever it is, just spend 15 seconds on one real specific question about the other person. Something you're truly curious about. Nothing scripted. Then let your competence do what it already does well. Warmth first opens the door. Always remember that. Competence is what makes them want you to stay in the room once you're through the door. Shift number 2, and this is the one that's going to change how you think about small talk completely. The low stakes moment that you keep avoiding because it feels too small to bother with is the exact mechanism that would make people like you more. And skipping it is working against you every single time. There's a well-known finding called the mere exposure effect, and in this research, people rated made-up words and unfamiliar symbols as more likable the more times they'd seen them before, with no new information added at all. Nothing about the symbol changed at all. Only the number of times someone had encountered it changed, and that alone was enough to shift how much they liked it. Now, this has been replicated over and over since, including with photographs of real faces, and the effect it holds even when people can't consciously recall having seen the stimulus before. Familiarity alone builds preference. That's the point. So before any deep connection or shared history ever gets established, and before either person has had a single meaningful conversation, it's really important to start working on familiarity. Let's say there's someone 2 levels above you whose path you cross maybe once every couple of weeks in the elevator, near the coffee break station, on the way to a meeting. Every single time you have a split-second decision to make. You have to say something or look down at your phone. If you're like a lot of my clients, you look down at your phone because the interaction feels too small to bother with and too awkward to attempt. So you tell yourself, you're saving your energy for a real conversation later, once there's something substantial to say. But that logic is backward. It's backward because each one of those tiny, low-stakes exchanges is one of your reps. And the research says the reps themselves are doing the work, not the content of what gets said. You don't need any clever line. You just need the exposure. I worked with a research scientist a while back who had been at the same company for 4 years, and the VP still didn't seem to fully register her name. She'd been saving herself, you could say, in her own words, for the one big impressive conversation that she was eventually going to have with him, once she had something worth saying. Except that conversation never arrived because you don't build familiarity in one big swing. So we shifted the plan. Instead of waiting for the big moment, she committed to one small, unscripted hello every time she passed him for 3 weeks straight. There was nothing clever involved. Good morning. How's your day going? That was the whole script. By week 3, he was the one stopping to ask what she was working on. Nothing about her competence changed in those 3 weeks. What changed was the exposure count, and that alone did the work the one big conversation never got the chance to do. And this pattern shows up with your peers too. Think about the colleague on the adjacent team, the one you always mean to introduce yourself to properly, the one you've now nodded past in the hallway for 8 months straight without ever once properly meeting them. Every one of those nods was a missed rep. 8 months of exposure with 0 conversion because the small moment kept getting treated as not worth the effort, when the small moment was the entire mechanism the whole time. So stop saving yourself for the big interaction and pick one person whose path you cross regularly and who barely registers you exist. And commit to one small, low-stakes hello every single time your paths cross for the next 2 weeks. And let familiarity do what it's built to do. Shift number 3, and I saved this one for last because it's the one that undoes the first 2 if you don't catch it. If you privately believe you're not a people person, you will unconsciously behave in ways that make that belief come true, and then treat the result as proof that you were right all along. This is called the self-verification theory, which refers to the assumption that people want to be seen or perceived accurately according to how they already see themselves. And they'll work often without realizing they're doing it to bring other people around to a view that matches their own self-concept, even when that self-concept is negative. So if you walk into a room believing you're the awkward one, you don't just feel that belief privately. You start behaving in ways that confirm it. You give shorter answers. You have less eye contact, pulling back right when a conversation could lead somewhere interesting. Does that sound familiar? And here's the trap. Other people respond to that behavior exactly the way you'd expect, with a little less warmth back, a little more distance. And you read that response as evidence. See, I told you I'm not good at this. Except what happened underneath is you set up the exact conditions that produce the outcome. And then you mistook the outcome for a fixed truth about who you are rather than a prediction you'd unknowingly helped to come true. You are very much in control of this because your thoughts are creating your results. So you can be intimately familiar with the research on warmth and exposure and still sabotage both of them if the belief is, I'm just not a people person. If that's still running the show in the background, those are the results that you'll receive. The tactics fail because a belief is working against them without your permission. The same way a phone that's constantly running an app you forgot about drains the battery, even when you're not touching it. You can add all the right tools to the surface, and the drain keeps happening underneath anyway until someone points you to where it's truly coming from. And the more senior you get, the more often you're the one walking into the room where nobody knows you yet. It could be a new committee, a new client, a new cross-functional group where your reputation hasn't arrived ahead of you. And every one of those places is another round of the same test. Warmth first, then competence, then whatever your belief is steering your behavior in between without your say-so. So if the belief never gets addressed, it doesn't fade either. It just becomes more expensive to live up to the expectations because the spaces become higher stakes and the 2 minutes before the real conversation starts carrying more weight, not less. So the fix for a belief has to happen at the belief level, not just the behavior level. So for the next 2 weeks, every time you catch yourself thinking some version of, I'm just not good at this, I want you to pause and ask one question. Is that true? Or is it just familiar? Because those are not the same. And a belief that you've held since you were 19 isn't automatically accurate just because you've had it for a long time and it feels like a fact. Identifying the difference out loud, even if it's just to yourself, is what starts to allow it to loosen its grip. So what I can do, just to ensure that you have a plan for Monday morning, let's recap this with a little more depth. Shift 1 was to lead with warmth before you lead with competence, because that's the order people are wired to process you in, whether either of you realize it's happening. Shift 2, stop saving yourself for the one big interaction and start racking up small, low-stakes reps instead, because familiarity is doing more of the work than your content ever will. And shift 3 is to watch for the belief running underneath both of those, because if you privately believe you're not a people person, you'll unknowingly prove yourself right, and then hand yourself the exact outcome you were trying to avoid in the first place. Here's your homework for this week, and I want you to do this because I don't want you to just nod along and forget it in a few hours. There's 2 parts. First, identify one person in your world whose path you cross regularly, but who barely knows you, and give them one small, unscripted hello every time you see them this week. No content required, just contact, the same way my client did with her VP. Second, keep a running note on your phone, and every single time you catch that I'm not a people person thought show up, write down what you were about to do right before it appeared. By Friday, look back at that list. I promise you'll start to see a pattern. And once you can see it clearly, you can finally interrupt it before it runs the whole interaction for you. If this episode names something that you've been feeling for a while, I want you to know it's not a personality flaw just sitting at the center of who you are. It's an unpracticed skill just right next to a skill that you've already mastered. And skills close with the right kind of practice, not with more time passing. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, Susan, I don't just want to understand this, I want it handled. That's exactly what we do with Step Into the Spotlight. It's 5 days with me in a small private container where there's no hiding in the back room and no more waiting for the big moment that never quite arrives on its own. We install the specific behaviors that read as presence, the warmth first opening, the low stakes rep, the belief work underneath it, so you can walk out of those 5 days truly different in the room, not just informed about why you've been holding back. Spots are limited on purpose because this work only happens when it's one-on-one. If you're serious about closing this gap now, instead of at the next performance review, go grab your seat at socialconfidencepro.com/spotlight. It's worth every bit of your time. Thanks for spending this time with me today, and go give somebody an unscripted hello this week. I'll see you next time. Bye for now. Wait, before you go, Picture this, walking into any room, a meeting, an event, or joining a conversation and just settling in. No second guessing, no overthinking, just a calm confidence that says you belong there. That's what it feels like when your presence finally matches your performance. If that feels out of reach, you're not alone. Many high-performing professionals I coach started there too, excellent in their job skills and socially underleveraged, and that's the gap we close. Go to socialconfidencepro.com/coach and book a time that works for you. We'll identify what's holding you back and map out what it would take to walk into any room with ease, polish, and a real presence. If you're ready to feel grounded, visible, and like the leader you already are, contact us. It's literally your call.